The Egyptian president holds a meeting at the armed forces headquarters in the new administrative capital. Egypt will host meetings tomorrow between Israeli and Palestinian delegations to discuss the exchange of Israeli and Palestinian detainees. And the foreign ministers of Egypt, Jordan and the United Arab Emirates, Indonesia, Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia and Qatar welcome Hamas's response in a joint statement. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has held a meeting at the Armed Forces headquarters in the new administrative capital with top military commanders, followed by a session of the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces. Presidential spokesman Ambassador Mohammed al-Shenawi said the event coincides with celebrations marking the 52nd anniversary of the October 6th victories. Earlier, President el-Sisi visited the memorial of the Armed Forces martyrs, laid wreaths on the tomb of the unknown soldiers, and honored late Presidents Anwar al-Sadat and Gamal Abdel Nasser. He paid tribute to the sacrifices of Egypt's fallen heroes and greeted war veterans, senior officials, and families of the late leaders. And now we move on to the latest developments in Gaza. The Egyptian Foreign Ministry has announced that Cairo will host meetings tomorrow between Israeli and Palestinian delegations to discuss field arrangements and details of the exchange of Israeli and Palestinian detainees. The ministry added that these consultations come as part of ongoing efforts to build on the regional and international momentum generated by U.S. President Donald Trump's plan to end the war in Gaza, emphasizing Egypt's commitment to advance peace and stability through dialogue and coordination with all concerned parties. Earlier, Egypt has welcomed Hamas's response to U.S. President Donald Trump's Gaza ceasefire plan, praising the movement and all Palestinian factions for making it a priority for civilian lives. In a statement by the Foreign Ministry, Egypt stated that Hamas's stance reflects a firm desire to end the dark era and move towards Palestinian statehood. That comes as Cairo praises Trump's leadership, especially his rejection of annexation or displacement in his reconstruction plan for Gaza. Egypt urged all parties to honor the U.S. proposal, being detailed negotiations, and advance a political path towards the two-state solution and lasting peace. A senior Egyptian security source has revealed that Israeli and Hamas delegations will begin arriving in Cairo on Sunday and Monday. The source added that this visit aims to discuss arrangements for implementing the field conditions necessary for a full detainee exchange under U.S. President Donald Trump's proposal. In a joint statement, the foreign ministers of Egypt, Jordan, the United Arab Emirates, Indonesia, Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar have welcomed Hamas's response to U.S. President Donald Trump's proposal to end the Gaza war, release all detainees, and begin talks on implementation mechanisms. The ministers also praised Trump's call for Israel to halt its bombardment immediately and start the exchange process, viewing these steps as a vital opportunity for a lasting ceasefire and relief to Gaza's humanitarian crisis. They reaffirmed support for efforts to ensure an Israeli withdrawal, full humanitarian access, the return of the Palestinian Authority to Gaza, and progress toward a new two-state solution. Egyptian Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli has said Egypt values Hamas's approval of U.S. President Donald Trump's peace plan for Gaza, describing it as a crucial step toward halting the war. Madbouli stressed that Hamas's acceptance opens the way for an immediate and lasting ceasefire in Gaza, ensuring the protection of civilians and preventing any displacement of the population. The Egyptian Prime Minister reaffirmed Egypt's continued efforts in coordination with partners to consolidate peace and stability in the Palestinian territories. Egypt's Foreign Minister Badr Abdel-Ati and Qatar's Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Mohammed bin Abdurrahman Al Thani have reaffirmed the importance of building on the regional and international momentum created by U.S. President Donald Trump's Gaza ceasefire plan. In a phone call, they described the initiative as a crucial opportunity to halt bloodshed and end the unprecedented humanitarian crisis, emphasizing the Arab stance calling for an immediate end to the war, full humanitarian access, and rejection of any displacement or demographic changes in Gaza. Egypt has been at the heart of efforts to end the Gaza war, leading mediation, delivering vital aid, and mobilizing regional and international support to stop the bloodshed and push for a lasting solution.
Since the outbreak of the war in Gaza in October 2023, Egypt has led intensive efforts from the very first moments to end hostilities and alleviate the suffering of the Palestinians. Cairo moved swiftly to deliver humanitarian aid through every possible channel and exerted consistent pressure regionally and internationally to stop the bloodshed and prevent any attempt to displace Palestinians from their land. U.S. President Donald Trump praised Egypt's leadership for its central role in shaping a plan to end the conflict, which includes ending the war and releasing Israeli detainees. He again thanked Cairo for its efforts. From the onset of the Al-Aqsa flood operation, Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi directed Egyptian diplomacy to intensify contacts with all relevant parties to contain the conflict. Egypt called on key international actors to intervene immediately to stop the escalation, urge Israel to halt attacks and provocations, and uphold international humanitarian law as the occupying power. Cairo hosted the Peace Summit on October 21, 2023, bringing together regional and global leaders to address the crisis. On June 10, 2024, Jordan, in coordination with Egypt, Bahrain, and the United Nations, organized an international humanitarian response conference to coordinate global action and logistics for Gaza. Egypt also convened an extraordinary Arab summit in March 2025 to discuss developments in the Palestinian cause. In parallel, Egypt maintained close coordination with Qatar and the United States to reach a ceasefire and a detainee exchange deal, while firmly rejecting any attempts to expel Palestinians or alter Gaza's demographic reality by force. Cairo has also delivered more than 70% of all aid that entered the Gaza Strip during the conflict, working through the Egyptian Red Crescent and global organizations, and opening Al Arish Airport to receive assistance from around the world. Today, Egypt remains a pivotal stabilizing force, affirming that the just and comprehensive solution lies in establishing a two-state reality and ending the occupation, the only path toward lasting peace and a definitive end to the war.
And for more analysis, we now move on to Salma Al-Fai in our newsroom. Salma.
Thank you, Rana. And for further analysis, we are joined from Cairo by the writer and political researcher at Al-Ahram, Mr. Bashir Abdel Fattah. Welcome, sir. Thank you so much for joining us today at Qnews. Sir, I just wanted to ask you, we'll start off with, how does Egypt, do you think, views tomorrow's meetings in Cairo as part of its broader efforts to consolidate regional and international support for peace?
And thanks for having me. I think the Egyptian role is very important in order to reserve peace process in the Middle East and put an end to the bloodshed in the area. Tomorrow, Egypt will host in Sharm el-Sheikh negotiations between Israeli and the Palestinian. It will be an indirect negotiations between the Israelis and the delegation of Hamas. In cooperation with Qatar and Turkey, the Egyptian rule will try to pave the way to reach a peace agreement between the two sides, Hamas and the Israelis, in order to diffuse explosion in the area. This negotiation will concentrate on the exchange of prisoners between the Israelis and the Palestinians in the first phase of the peace agreement, or the expected peace agreement between the two sides, with the supervision of the United States. After that, there will be a next step or a next phase of the negotiation in order to discuss the other issues such as the Israeli withdrawal from Gaza and the future of the sector.
Okay. Sir, what are the key objectives do you think Egypt is hoping to achieve by hosting the Israeli and Palestinian delegations for these discussions?
I think Egypt can make some sort of breakthrough in the negotiation because both sides trust the Egyptian efforts and the Egyptian intention to reach the peace agreement. In addition to that, Egypt has a very important history in mediation between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And I think the Egyptians can provide and introduce a comprehensive approach of peace agreement, and also can play a vital role in implementing any feedback of this negotiation in cooperation with Turkey, Qatar, and the United States.
And how does Egypt ensure that the detainee exchange talks do align with the broader framework of the U.S. President Donald Trump's proposal for ending the Gaza war?
It is important to coordinate with the American side because, as you know, the only side who can put pressures on Netanyahu is the American side, especially the President Donald Trump. So Egypt is keen on coordinating with President Trump in order to put pressures on Netanyahu. Because without these pressures, American pressures, I think it will be difficult to persuade Netanyahu to accept the feedback of this negotiation, especially in the second phase of the agreement. In the beginning, the exchange negotiation will be easier than the second phase, which can discuss, for example, the weapons of Hamas, the withdrawal of the Israelis from the sector, and in addition to that, the administration, the future administration of the Gaza sector.
And the reconstruction of Gaza. And to what extent does Egypt's coordination with the regional and international partners, do you think, strengthens the prospects for implementing the proposed ceasefire arrangements?
It is very important because any peace negotiations need guarantee from regional and international actors. With Israel, you are in a real need all the time to the support of the regional and the international actors in order to put pressures on Israel to resume implementing any agreement. Because as we know, in last January, Benjamin Netanyahu accepted or implemented the first phase of the agreement. He restored some Israeli prisoners with Hamas, and then he withdrew from the agreement and he stopped implementing the second phase of the agreement. So we need an international and regional actor to guarantee the implementation of the phases of this agreement.
Mr. Bashir, can you shed some light, please, on Cairo's role regarding hosting of these meetings? They do reflect Egypt's long-standing role as a cornerstone of the Middle East diplomacy and conflict resolution. Can you talk to us a little bit about our role as Egyptians and Egypt?
First of all, let us remind our audience, Salma, that Egypt began the peace process with Israel in 1979.
Yeah.
And the peace agreement between Egypt and Israel is the cornerstone of the stability and the peace process in the area. So Egypt has the initiative, the experience, the efforts, and the trust. You can trust Egypt when you talk about this process or in negotiations or agreement. So I think you cannot speak about peace, stability, agreement, reconstruction in Gaza without the Egyptian contribution. So I think the American administration and the Israeli government and the Palestinian as well, all of them know very well that the Egyptian contribution is very vital and important for the success of any negotiation in order to reach a peace agreement as fast as possible.
And coming back again to the topic of the detainee exchange, and in what ways do you think Egypt is working with both sides to create the necessary field conditions for a successful and orderly detainee exchange?
Detainee exchange is very important for the Americans and the Israelis because Netanyahu is suffering from pressures from the families of this detainee. So I think Egypt can make breakthrough in this issue.
In what sense? Can you shed some light and maybe elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah. I think it will be faster than any other issue because the pressures from the Americans and the Israelis family will help so much to get the agreement as fast as possible because Netanyahu is a real need for this step, and also Donald Trump. Donald Trump is running for Nobel Prize
for peace.
Yes, for peace, yeah. So I think this will help Egypt to reach the agreement as fast as possible with the guarantee of the Americans and the Egyptians and the partnership of Qatar and Turkey.
Well, I come back again to peace and looking ahead. How can Egypt's current diplomatic efforts contribute to shaping a sustainable peace framework that supports regional stability and the two-state solution?
Although Egypt is not a partner, but it is a mediator. We can say we are a mediator in this peace negotiation, but we are a concrete mediator because without Egypt you cannot reach this agreement.
Yes.
Although the Americans are supporting, Donald Trump is trying, running for the Nobel Prize for peace. But still, Egypt is the key, the cornerstone for any efforts to get to reach this agreement. So I think Egypt can initiate. Egypt can also build up the peace agreement with the realistic approach because the Egyptians know very well the progress of the conflict between Arabs and Israel through decades. And
yes.
they have the initiative and the experience and trust.
And that was Mr. Bashir Abdel Fattah from Cairo, the writer and political researcher at El Ahram. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today at Qnews. And now we go back to Rana Al Assas in our studio. Rana.
Thank you so much, Salma. And now we move on with the news bulletin, where smoke has risen over Gaza this morning as Israeli planes and tanks pounded areas across the Gaza Strip, destroying several residential buildings. The latest bombardments comes as Palestinians hope that a U.S. plan to end the war would soon ease their suffering. Israel escalated its offensive as U.S. President Donald Trump, who had called for an end to the bombing, said that Israel had agreed to an initial withdrawal line inside Gaza and that the ceasefire will be immediately effective once Hamas confirms. German Foreign Minister has described US President Donald Trump's plan for Gaza as a significant opportunity to finally achieve peace, as per his description. He said this opportunity must be seized before his departure for Qatar, where he plans to meet with representatives from the region. The German Foreign Minister called on Hamas to give up its weapons and be prepared for this agreement. Pope Leo XIV has said he hoped that a peace plan for Gaza would soon reach the desired results, after acknowledging the significant steps made in the negotiations to end the conflict between Israel and Hamas. Speaking during his weekly prayer, the Pope asked all parties involved to commit the peace process, emphasizing the urgent need to end the conflict and establish a just and lasting peace. He also renewed calls for a permanent ceasefire in the nearly 2-year devastating war on Gaza and the release of all detainees. And now we move on to the latest developments in the Russia-Ukrainian conflict. At least 30 people were injured in a Russian drone strike on a railway station in the Ukrainian northeastern Sumy region, President Volodymyr Zelensky said. Footage released by the Ukrainian presidency showed damaged trains and wreckage at the site following the overnight attack. The strike is part of intensified Russian assaults across multiple fronts, as both sides report heavy fighting amidst ongoing offensives. Ukraine is covering major roads areas near the front lines with nets as drone warfare becomes a defining feature of its conflict with Russia. Both sides are deploying swarms of low-cost, explosive-laden drones as the war enters its 4th year. Officials say a drone strike on Friday killed French photojournalist Antony Lalkian and wounded Ukrainian journalist Georgy Ivashenko in eastern Ukraine. The growing use of drones has forced Kyiv to adapt its defensives and infrastructure to the escalating threat. Ukrainian troops have reinforced its armored vehicles with metal cages in Donetsk to protect against rising drone attacks on and behind the front lines. Footage shows sparks flying as servicemen weld protective cages onto personnel carriers, a tactic aimed at reducing drone damage. Commander Victor said the defensives in production for over a year and a half have already saved many lives as drone warfare increasingly shapes the conflict.
Ці сітки вже зберегли життя багато особовому складу.
Russia's defense ministry released video of a Navy corvette conducting air defense drills in the Baltic Sea, firing anti-aircraft missiles from a Pantsir M system to repel a stimulated airstrike. The vessel Storm, a Project 22-800 Carcourt class corvette, targeted missiles launched from the Kaliningrad coast during the exercise. Moscow said the drills aimed to test the ship's readiness against aerial threats. Karkut-class ships are multi-purpose missiles and artillery vessels designed to operations in confirmed maritime zones, underscoring Russia's focus on strengthening naval air defense in the Baltic amidst heightened regional tensions. Sweden's Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson says the EU states must strengthen their own anti-drone capabilities while urging the bloc to simplify procurement rules. Speaking in Copenhagen after a European leaders meeting, Kristersson said each country should build its own defense but cooperate closely on detection. His comments come as Brussels weighs proposals for a drone wall to counter rising incursions, though cost and detail remain unclear. Russia, accused by some of involvement, has denied responsibility.
Keep things where they should be kept, but the European Union itself has a very good potential of simplifying.
The Kremlin says that the world is no closer to peace 6 weeks after the Russia-US summit in Alaska, blaming Europe for prolonging the conflict. Spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the European countries were pushing Ukraine to abandon negotiations and continue fighting Russia. His comments come amidst intensified clashes on multiple fronts and renewed Russian claims of battlefield advances. Moving on, the U.S. has warned that Colombia's peacekeeping mission could be at risk over what it called President Gustavo Petro's irresponsible security policies. Speaking at the UN Security Council, U.S. envoy Mike Waltz said Petro's approach could jeopardize the extension of the mission, whose mandate expires at the end of October. Other members urged that the mission remain in place, especially ahead of the tense 2026 presidential election following the assassination of candidate Turbay. China has called for the full implementation of Colombia's 2016 peace agreement and urged continued international support for the country's peace process. Speaking at a UN Security Council meeting, Deputy Permanent Representative Zhang Chong said Colombia has made significant progress since the accord was signed, but still faces major challenges. He voiced support for President Gustavo Petro's efforts to boost resources and coordination and urged continued reforms, especially in land and rural development. Zhang also called for stronger security measures to protect vulnerable groups, including women, children, and ethnic minorities. That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here's what we have been covering. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi holds a meeting at the Armed Forces headquarters in the new administrative capital. Egypt will host meetings tomorrow between Israeli and Palestinian delegations to discuss the exchange of Israeli and Palestinian detainees. And the foreign ministers of Jordan, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, Indonesia, Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia and Qatar welcome Hamas's response in a joint statement. This concludes our news bulletin for this hour. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok at QNewsEG to stay informed. Thank you very much for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews. From me, myself, goodbye.